Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I'm your host. And in this episode, we are going to be recapping the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft. It was a very exciting draft. You know, it's strong in some positions, weak in others, and there were definitely a lot of surprises to break down. So we're going to go through all the picks of the first round. We're going to focus more on kind of the skill position, offensive side of the ball, just because this is a fantasy football show. But I'll briefly touch on all the picks, at least, let you know who was drafted. And I'm recording this immediately after the first round on April 24th, 2025. I'll probably get this posted on April 25th, though, by the time I record it and post it. But also here with me is Cooper, the wiener dog extraordinaire in the background on the futon. If you do want the video version of the podcast, if you are listening on an audio only version, you can just head over to my YouTube channel, Fantasy Football Prodigy, and say what's up, drop a like, drop a comment, whatever. But make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast. And let's get into episode 36 of the Fantasy Football Prodigy podcast. So we're just going to start from the top, go with pick one. No surprise there. The Tennessee Titans were on the clock. They didn't trade the pick. They made the selection that pretty much everyone assumed they would, and that is Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. There was a time where maybe people thought Shedeur Sanders was going to be the top quarterback off the board, but as the college offseason and the pre-draft season progressed, it became more obvious that Cam Ward was going to be that guy. So Will Levis is out as the starter for the Titans. Congratulations, Titans fans. There was a time where I thought maybe he had some potential, but last year really showed that, you just can't roll him out there for another season. So he's got Pollard and Spears in the backfield, and then his weapons are not great. I mean, Kelvin Ridley at wide receiver, that's a good weapon. After that, though, their wide receiver 2 right now is Treylon Burks or Van Jefferson, although they did also just sign Tyler Lockett. Are we calling him washed at this point? I think it's fair to call him washed. I mean, one of my favorite players ever, man. I mean, he's got the greatest name ever, Tyler, but yeah, we'll see if he's a contributor. And then you got Chig at tight end, Chig. So, like all number one overall picks, they're expected to be good, but often they are not. So hopefully they can build a good team around Cam Ward and not break the guy. Because a lot of times these number one picks have all the talent in the world, but if their coaching staff and the team around them can't help them develop and turn into that franchise player, then it doesn't really matter. They fizzle out. So we'll see what happens with him, but that was probably the right pick to make. There was a trade for the number 2 pick. So the Cleveland Browns originally had the second overall pick, but the Jacksonville Jags traded up to get that pick at number 2 overall. So Jacksonville picked number 2, and the Browns moved down to number 5. I was trying to find like a little overview of what they gave up. Okay, so Cleveland received the number 5 pick, a second round pick, number 36, and then a 4th round pick, number 126. And they also got a first round pick in 2026. And then Jacksonville got the number 2 pick, a 4th round pick, number 104. And a 6th round pick, number 200, according to this ESPN article I just found. And they traded up to select Travis Hunter, wide receiver / cornerback out of Colorado. One of the most intriguing players in this draft. He was an elite corner and wide receiver at Colorado. So for fantasy purposes, we're hoping that, he focuses more on playing receiver. He has come out and said that he wants to play both positions. I just don't know if at the highest level he's going to be able to play both positions full time, just because even if you can technically do it, your production is going to, you're going to kind of cannibalize your production by trying to do both. Like, you can't give 100% effort as a wide receiver and a cornerback if you're on the field constantly. So maybe he's a freak and maybe he can. I don't know. He is, if anyone could do it, it's probably him. But at least me, for fantasy purposes, fantasy football players, I'm hoping he is a full-time wide receiver and maybe he takes the field on defense just in certain situations, certain packages. The inverse could also be true where he's a full-time defensive player and, he only gets a few packages on offense. We just don't know how they're going to use him. But even if he doesn't see a ton of snaps at wide receiver, the hope would be that when he's on the field, if that were to be the case, he would see a lot of touches on the snaps where he's out there, a high usage rate, a lot of targets per route run, that type of business. So Trevor Lawrence gets another weapon. They shipped out a couple of people. So at their wide receiver core right now is Brian Thomas Jr., who was a stud as a rookie. They still have Gabe Davis, Parker Washington, Diami Brown, and then they just drafted Travis Hunter. So he's immediately going to step in as the number 2 there beside Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe we'll call him the 1B to Brian Thomas's 1A. I mean, he's a rookie and hasn't proven anything, but he's probably going to be good. And then, Gabe Davis is there as kind of like a field stretcher. And they don't have Evan Ingram anymore, so it's more targets to go around. Brenton Strange is there as a starting tight end, most likely, for Jacksonville. And remember, we still have a couple days left of the draft. This is only one round. There's 7 rounds. So a lot of this analysis I'm giving, who knows? Like, if I'm saying, oh, he's the only receiver on the team at a certain point, make sure you stay up to date with what happens after this round. And I'm going to try to get, more podcast episodes out about the ensuing rounds as they come. Third overall, the New York Giants take Abdul Carter, edge rusher out of Penn State. No surprise there. He is a freak and he's a very good player. So, and the Giants had a really good draft, as you'll see. Well, it depends what you think about, Shedeur Sanders versus Jackson Dart. And maybe I'm burying the lead here. We are going to talk about how Sanders wasn't drafted. We are going to talk about that. Maybe I should have led with that. But I'll bring it up about the midway point of this episode here. Kind of like when we get to the Steelers pick. After that, offensive tackle Will Campbell out of LSU. They got another tackle to protect Drake May. I don't think that's ever a bad thing. From my understanding, there was not a consensus number 1 tackle. Like I've seen a lot of different, best player available or best, draft prospect lists, and Will Campbell is definitely like one of the, premier tackle prospects, but they definitely, they got to choose their guy at the 4th overall pick. And I'm going to pull up a little list here. I mean, I just to make sure there's not like a clear best tackle. I mean, yeah, it really does depend like what list you look at. So they decided to go out and get their guy with Will Campbell. So good pick for the Patriots if that works out. Obviously, you got to protect that young quarterback. Mason Graham goes to the Cleveland Browns, defensive tackle out of Michigan. With the 5th overall pick, they traded back and they took Mason Graham. I don't got much to say about him, dude. I mean, this is a fantasy football show, but they take I don't know. I mean, they got some draft capital to trade back, but they end up taking Shedeur, or they could have had Travis Hunter, who's arguably, the best player in the draft, and they got some draft capital, but they get, Mason Graham, who out of Michigan, who, maybe he'll be good too, but I don't know. We'll see how that pans out. I just worry because, you go to the Browns and you got you're already kind of up against it, just with how a lot of their, their picks don't often work out. I mean, obviously, some of them do, but in terms of fantasy football goodness, though, this is the pick we're most excited about, I think, at least me and most people. That's going to be Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State. Just an absolute phenom. He had 2,600 rushing yards in 2024. Looks like that was second in NCAA history behind Barry Sanders in terms of single season numbers. He's just, the only knock on him is that he played at Boise State, and people wonder if that's gonna translate to the NFL. But he also had 569 receiving yards, which led all FBS running backs in 2023. Wow. Yeah. So he goes to the Raiders. Geno Smith is, the new quarterback there now. So I think him being there is going to help this offense. And I don't know, when you hear about the Raiders, you don't necessarily think of them as an elite landing spot, but they got Geno Smith. At wide receiver, they only really have Jacoby Myers. Trey Tucker is there too, but Brock Bowers at tight end is an alpha receiver just at the tight end position, and they might add to that position later in the draft. And I could just see this being, a surprisingly good landing spot if this offense is able to, somewhat move the ball, which I think there's a chance that, I think they have a chance to be a decent offense. So Jeanty he's going to be the 101 in dynasty drafts, I would imagine. Yeah, they just brought Pete Carroll in to be the head coach, who, he likes to run the ball. He's going to try to, build a good defense there. So, he could easily be a really good running back one in his first year. After that, who we got here? The New York Jets take Armand Membou, offensive tackle out of Missouri. Just another offensive lineman to, build that line. I think that's definitely like a much needed pick. They just brought Aaron Glenn in there to be the head coach from the Detroit Lions. So they're trying to kind of rebuild things from the ground up there. They brought in Justin Fields as their new quarterback, so they're going to try to protect him and, fortify that offensive line. But he's going to the Jets, so you never know. That often doesn't work out. And I should talk. I'm a Vikings fan. I get it. I know I'm wearing my Purple People Eater shirt, dude. Look, the Vikings are one of the best regular season teams of all time. That's all I got to say about that. Moving on. This was I don't know if I'm going to say this is like a surprising pick, but for some reason, I'm just pessimistic about it. And I'm by no means one of these guys who watches a ton of college football and grinds tape. And, I'm not like the prospect expert. I'm better at, kind of looking at depth charts, looking at the situation, being like, okay, this is where this guy has an opportunity to, make a name for himself and have a role. But at the 8th overall pick, the Carolina Panthers select Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. I hope I said his first name right. T-Mac. Everyone just calls him T-Mac. Wide receiver out of Arizona. He's 6'4", 219 pounds. I remember thinking, I was like, oh, he kind of has the same build as Mike Evans. And then someone on the ESPN broadcast said, he kind of reminds me of Mike Evans. So, he's kind of like Mike Evans. He's kind of like a bigger, go up and get it type of guy. He's from my understanding, he's not necessarily the best at like running routes, getting separation. And a lot of times, those players, sometimes they can struggle. So, it's not necessarily a bad pick. And, if he's the next Mike Evans, then, Bryce Young is going to be a very, very happy camper to have a weapon here. And you like to see that the Panthers are at least trying to give weapons to Bryce Young. And he's going to step in as, their actual like alpha X receiver, try to get down the field, make big plays. And yeah, their depth chart right now, Bryce Young at quarterback. They got T-Mac there. Adam Thielen is still kicking. Xavier Legette, who they drafted early last year, it's looking more and more like he might not be, the prospect that they were hoping him to be. And then Jalen Coker moves to probably 4th on the depth chart. We'll see how Legette gets used Adam Thielen, I mean, how old is he now? He's 34 years old. He'll be 35 in August. And I actually have him on my dynasty team. So I traded like a bag of chips for him last year on my title run. We won the championship. I don't think I played him. There were times where I should have played him over like household like fantasy studs because he still had some good games last year. So I'm hoping he's, nice little depth piece for me if in case of injury and bye weeks and all that. But anyways, moving on, the New Orleans Saints had the 9th overall pick, and a lot of people thought maybe they'd take a quarterback just with the uncertainty around Derek Carr's injury. But they go tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. There was a baby on camera that threw up when he got drafted. I think it was this guy, wasn't it? There was someone. I think it was this guy. It wasn't him. That did happen. So is that a good thing? Is that a bad sign? I don't know. But yeah, the Saints can kind of build up this offensive line with the addition of Kelvin Banks Jr. And then also the Saints did not pick up the 5th-year option on right tackle Trevor Penning. So that, is another that opens a spot of need for the Saints. Interesting pick here. So at 10th overall, the Chicago Bears were on the clock, and they actually go with a tight end. A tight end, we'll say. And it might surprise you. They went with Colston Loveland out of Michigan. Tight end, 10th overall, 6'6", 248 pounds. The only reason I kind of said it that way is because I think a lot of people thought Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State, would probably go first. Maybe just depends on, who you ask. I mean, but it seemed to me, at least leading up to the draft, like Warren was maybe going to go first, but they're both two really highly ranked tight ends, and you'll see that Warren didn't go much later. So it was preference, and the Bears brought in Ben Johnson to be the head coach after being with the Lions and having that great offense there. So I'm going to trust him. I'm going to trust his judgment. And yeah, I think it's a good spot for Caleb Williams. He needs weapons. Granted, he has weapons there. I'm not saying like, they need to add weapons. They have nobody. But at the tight end position, they were rolling out Cole Kmet, who is a quality tight end. Solid, but I think Loveland has the potential to be a bigger, a bigger part of the offense, a better player. He's just, he's a really good offensive weapon in the passing game. And yeah, he should be a good player for Caleb Williams. At wide receiver, they have DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and then after that, it's Zacchaeus, Duvernay, Tyler Scott. So, we'll see where Loveland lines up. And obviously, Ben Johnson was part of that team that drafted Sam Laporta early for the Lions. And I know last year, his sophomore year was a little disappointing, but his rookie year, he came out and really put up a lot of good numbers. So he's a good blocker, good receiver, or a good run blocker, I should say. I'm kind of just reading some notes on him as I go. Yeah, Caleb Williams has good weapons there, and we've seen it was a long trend where good or tight ends don't do well their rookie year. It's an anomaly. We've had a few good tight end seasons. Sam Laporta recently in his rookie year. Brock Bowers, most notably, had an amazing rookie year last year. I don't think this guy's going to be Brock Bowers. I don't think anyone is Brock Bowers, but even Kyle Pitts, as disappointing as he's been, I believe he had 1,000 yards as a rookie, which is pretty rare. So I think we're kind of shifting to, we have to get away from this idea that tight ends cannot succeed in their first year. I will say, though, he's got some guys to compete with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, and even Cole Kmet. Are they just going to throw him on the bench and never play him? I don't know. Probably not. Obviously, Loveland is the guy with the 10th overall pick. You want him to be the guy there, but we'll see how he's utilized, just usage wise. And I thought maybe they'd surprise and take like a running back here super early, but they're still rolling out DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson. So after that, 49ers on the clock with the 11th overall pick. They end up taking Mykel, however you pronounce it, edge rusher out of Georgia. I think, the 49ers are a weird team. They are pretty much rebuilding a lot of that offense, and just in general, they got rid of a lot of players on defense too. If I'm remembering their offseason correctly. I know there's like a defensive tackle or two that they got rid of, and I think there were some other players, and you can never go wrong with taking a good edge rusher. So in terms of fantasy football, if we take a look at the 49ers depth chart here, it's more so what they didn't take than what they did. So Brandon Ayuk is still there at wide receiver, but he's coming off that injury, and even when he was on the field, he did not play well at all last year. After that, Ricky Pearsall, who they drafted early last year, he got shot in his first offseason, and then he flashed at times, but he also disappeared kind of down the stretch. And then they got Jawan Jennings, who was pretty relevant for fantasy football. So I imagine they'll take a receiver at some point, but this is not a very deep receiver draft. And, it might just be Pearsall and Jennings are very, very involved, and Jawan Jennings might be a steal in fantasy. Obviously, you have Christian McCaffrey there. Part of me was like, oh my gosh, like, are they going to draft a running back super early? Because, I have McCaffrey in my Dynasty League, and I still won the championship without him. And after trading for Tyreek Hill, somehow I made it work. But I was like, that would just be what happens, isn't it? And also, I kind of buried him, but George Kittle at tight end, he might be my favorite tight end value, depending on his ADP, because he's going to be a huge part of this offense. Like, especially if they don't add like a meaningful receiver in this draft, like that's going to be something to monitor. But next up at number 12, the Dallas Cowboys take guard Tyler Booker out of Alabama. It seemed like this was a little bit of a reach. What's his name? Zach Martin, future Hall of Fame guard, recently retired for the Cowboys, so that's a huge hole to fill. Another Tyler. Can't go wrong with drafting a Tyler. But the Cowboys are really good at drafting offensive linemen, so you gotta wonder if it's gonna work out. But I heard a lot of people say that it was a little bit of a reach. But you know what? If like I'm looking at this other list here, and it's like they have this guy ranked as like their 17th overall prospect. So, the draft is such a crapshoot. Take the guy you like. And I will say, as someone who doesn't know a ton about college offensive linemen, this guy seems awesome. He was really excited and showed a lot of emotion when he got drafted. He was very, very hyped up. So I'm rooting for the guy as long as he's not playing the Vikings. Next up, Miami Dolphins take Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan. No major offensive moves there. There are some scenarios where things get shaken up quite a bit for the Dolphins, depending on if they, drafted someone early, but it's still Achane is the clear lead running back. After that, it's just Jalen Wright and Alexander Madison. So a lot of people are expecting them to draft a running back at some point, and kind of be like the Thunder to Devon Achane's Lightning. Because, I don't know, it seems like people have kind of given up on Jalen Wright already. Maybe internally they haven't, but, we'll see. And then at wide receiver, it's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then it's Nick Westbrook, Akine, Malik Washington. So, they might draft receiver at some point. Tyreek Hill is getting older, and he was not himself last year, whether it was because of the wrist injury that he suffered, and that, weird incident, or if he's just getting old. I don't know, but then they got Jonnu at tight end, Jonnu Smith. We'll see if we can replicate that production, but still the status quo there. But again, this is just after round 1. There's 6 more rounds, so that depth chart could be shaken up with, a second or third round pick. And then, as I mentioned, another tight end went off the board early in this draft. That's Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State, 6'6", 256 pounds. One of the top tight end prospects. Just depends who you ask. He was very versatile. They were kind of talking during the broadcast about all the positions he plays. Like he lined up at receiver, like in the slot, out wide, at tight end, running back. He lined up as he played quarterback a little bit. Really versatile player, and it's definitely a position of need for the Colts. So I love the pick for them. The only issue with him for fantasy is going to be quarterback. Do they have one on the roster? Honestly, I think probably not. Anthony Richardson is a freak athlete, but he has not shown any ability to be a even competent NFL quarterback. Like he's flashed at times. He's made some freaky throws down the field, but the guy he struggles to complete half his passes. And maybe Tyler Warren will help if he gets, short area targets, gets open close to the line of scrimmage. But even then, like Richardson misses those throws sometimes. And behind Tyler Warren on that depth chart is for tight end is Drew Ogletree, Will Mallory, and Mo Alley Cox. So as much as I'd love to see Mo Alley Cox run wild, that's not going to happen. And he joins a team receiver room of Michael Pittman Jr., Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pearce, Josh Downs. Laquan Treadwell is on the Colts. Fun fact. I did not know that, but he's going to be a good target in the middle of the field. And then hopefully this offense can move a little bit because I have Jonathan Taylor on my dynasty team, so I need him to put up some numbers. And honestly, behind Anthony Richardson is Daniel Jones, and for fantasy purposes, Danny Dimes playing would probably be better in terms of getting the ball to the weapons, moving them down the field, etc. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons take Jalen Walker, linebacker out of Georgia. Definitely a good pick. They needed a linebacker, and he can rush the passer a little bit. So yeah, I don't know, for fantasy purposes, they didn't draft another quarterback when they already had their quarterback, their supposed quarterback, like they did last year, drafting Penix after signing Kirk Cousins to $1 billion contract. So we held our breath. Were they going to take Sanders? Just add to that quarterback room. You can never have enough quarterbacks, But yeah, he's going to be a good pass rusher, or that's their hope at least. Big need for them. And we'll see. We'll see if he can get to the QB. Another defensive player for pick 16. Next up, we got Walter Nolen out of Ole Miss going to the Arizona Cardinals. Fortify the interior defensive line there. No fantasy notes there really. Another defensive player, Shemar Stewart, edge rusher out of Texas A&M, goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. Very interesting here. He had 11 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks in 3 seasons at Texas A&M. But he's one of these players that was drafted for his traits and his tape and his physical ability and his explosiveness, his athleticism. But he only had 4.5 sacks in his career at Texas A&M in 3 years. So it's very interesting how a player can do that and be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. I'm not saying like, oh, wow, he's going to be bad, but it's just interesting, like how even with that lack of production, teams really highly value this guy. And it kind of reminds me of, and they said this on the broadcast, like Daniil Hunter, who's a for the Texans now, but he was a really good pass rusher for the Vikings for years, and he didn't really have any production from my memory in college, but he had the physical ability, and then all of a sudden in the NFL he's getting sacks left and right. It's just weird how a guy can have those traits, not do it in college, but then go to the NFL where everyone is elite, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're getting 15, 20 sacks. It's just, that's the hope for Shemar Stewart. For fantasy purposes, we want him to be a bust. Obviously, you know, man to man, I want him to be successful, obviously, but if you're talking fantasy football, you want the Bengals defense to be bad. You want Joe Burrow to have to air it out to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and put up, you know, fantasy goodness. Plus, for the Bengals, Trey Hendrickson, their stud defensive end, pass rusher. He still doesn't have a contract as of this recording. So, you know, that could be a bigger need if they're not able to, you know, get him that contract extension. After that, Seattle Seahawks take Gray Zabel, guard out of North Dakota State. Especially after adding Sam Darnold to the team at quarterback, getting rid of Geno Smith, adding Darnold. Sam Darnold is a guy who thrives when the pocket is clean and the situation around him is working. Everything's working well. When he gets rattled and when things don't go according to plan, that's when Sam Darnold it doesn't look pretty. You know, he gets flustered, he can turn over the ball. It's just not what you want. So just anything that they can do to improve that offensive line is going to help. Yeah. And we'll see. I don't know if this is true, but I feel like I remember hearing at one point, I don't have the data or anything, but I feel like at one point I heard drafting guards is like kind of a predictable. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Don't even listen to me. Turn this off, and you can mute me and turn it back on in like 10 seconds. But I remember hearing like someone say at some point that drafting guards is a good bet because it's easy to, like, not easy, but it's easier to see their skills translate to the NFL. And like if you see XYZ in college, they could probably do in the NFL, and it usually works out. So I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have even said that. Maybe that's a misinformation, but my Vikings drafted a guard, so we're gonna go with that, and we'll talk about that in a few picks here. But this to me was the most surprising pick of the draft. Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver out of Ohio State, goes to the Tampa Bay Bucks with the 19th overall pick. 6'1", 202 out of Ohio State. This was a truly shocking pick. My jaw dropped. I truly couldn't believe it. You know, he's one of the better wide receiver prospects, but very interesting that this was his landing spot. They already have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at wide receiver, who, you know, that's a great 1-2 punch. Obviously, Mike Evans is getting older. Chris Godwin, you know, he's coming off an injury where he had a season-ending injury, but before that, he was on an absolute tear. He was on my dynasty team, and I believe he was like the wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy football at the time that he got hurt. It's interesting to see how they're going to use him. Maybe it's just really a pick for the future, but they also have Jalen McMillan, who, you know, I think his numbers are a little inflated compared to what I think his fantasy value is actually going to be in McMillan. But as your wide receiver 3, like, I think that's fine. And then, you know, they have K-Dot at tight end, but yeah, I was very shocked for a team that, you know, has other needs to fill. I was surprised that they went wide receiver when that's probably their, you know, I don't know. They just didn't need a receiver. I mean, you can say though, Godwin's coming off the injury. Mike Evans is, you know, 30. He's going to be 30, I believe. So I can kind of see it has me worried because he's 31. He's already 31. He's going to be 32 in August. Mike Evans, according to his age on ESPN here. It has me worried because I traded for Mike Evans in Dynasty last year, and I already had Chris Godwin, so I got both of them. So is this draft pick like telling us like, yo, one of these guys is washed? Or I don't know. And yeah, and Jalen McMillan, he had 8 touchdowns last year. But if you look at like when he was on the field and involved, like it was a lot of his fantasy production was touchdown. So maybe Egbuka's gonna come in and be the wide receiver 3 this year. The other 2 are gonna be fine, and then a year or 2 down the road, that's when we'll really see Egbuka. But yeah, he's got a depth chart to climb here. After that, defensive pick for the Broncos at 20, Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. They have a very good defense, and they added to it. That's what they want there. They already have Patrick Surtain, and now they have their other starting corner. So, good pick for the Broncos there, and it filled a need to pair with Patrick Surtain. I think that was a good pick for them. If he really is as good as as he's supposed to be. Another defensive pick here, Derrick, Harmon to the Steelers. And at pick 21, defensive tackle out of Oregon, this is where I thought, okay, Shedeur Sanders, you are a Pittsburgh Steeler. No. I thought for sure they were going to draft him. They have a desperate need at quarterback. Desperate need. Their quarterback depth chart right now, Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. You could not have a worse depth chart. And I understand, there's the draft, there's Aaron Rodgers still left, but to me, this screams, okay, they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers or trade for Kirk Cousins. But in my head, it's like, okay, if I'm the Steelers, why would I pass up on Sanders when, I get it, he's got, there's noise wherever he goes, but he's a good prospect. I think we're at the point where Sanders is underrated because the Steelers pass on him. They'd rather bring in Aaron Rodgers or wait and pray that they get, a quarterback later in the draft. And normally when you have the opportunity to draft your franchise quarterback, you do it. You don't wait. So that was very interesting, but they get a defensive tackle there. Very, very surprised there. And obviously Cam Hayward is getting older. So, the need for DT gets even more important there. And then at 22, I love this pick. The Chargers take Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. Almost just choked on my on air there. Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. This is a phenomenal pick. Najee Harris, running back 1 season. Insert the meme of Grandpa Simpson walking in and walking out. Is that the grandpa or Homer that does that? Whichever of the Simpson bloodline does that. I think it's the grandpa, right? Anyways, yeah, the Chargers want to play defense and run the ball. They have Justin Herbert. They can throw the ball. He had to throw the ball a little bit more down the stretch of the season last year, but this is a great landing spot. And a lot of, they still have a need at wide receiver. They have Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnson, Mike Williams. After that, it's Jalen Reagor on the depth chart. So they have a need at wide receiver, but this is a really, really good landing spot. And first round running backs, it's a good bet in fantasy football that they're going to be given an opportunity to succeed and get a workload. And he was a really, really good prospect. Like, this running back class is very strong. And obviously, Jeanty is the number 1 running back, but yeah, there's other guys that really have some good potential here, and Hampton is one of them. And yeah, this team wants to run the ball, even though they have Justin Herbert. It just tells you what they want to do in the draft. Like, they have a wide receiver need, but their only running back really was Najee Harris. And what do? They draft another running back because they want to run the ball. He can he's a really, yeah, I'm very excited to see his ADP and like, yeah, he's gonna be good. He is whew, getting hot and bothered over here in the stew. Yeah, he can do it all. Good runner, catch passes. He makes plays after the catch. So it's gonna come down to, you know, his blocking, and I'm just reading a little blurb on him. He locates assignments and steps up to meet defenders as a pass blocker. He knocks defenders back and even knocks them to the ground. That's from Steve Munk. So he's got a good start on blocking already. That's always a big thing with rookie running backs, is not being a liability in the pass blocking department. So that right there is oh man, that could be great. But next up, another fantasy relevant pick here. Matthew Golden goes to the Green Bay Packers, wide receiver out of Texas. I don't want to say I predicted that they would draft a receiver, but when they were on the clock, I was like, I said out loud to my lady, I was like, are they going to draft? Oh, I think they're going to draft a receiver. And yeah, they never draft a receiver in round one. I think it's been over 20 years since they drafted a round one wide receiver. And they break the streak to go with Matthew Golden. Big play guy. Again, this wide receiver class isn't super deep, but this is one of the top ranked receivers. He can make plays down the field. He ran a sub 4.340. So he's got potential to be a difference maker. I'm a little worried about his rookie season production just because, you know, they have Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks at receiver already. They have a number of guys who are really good, like wide receiver 2s and 3s. They don't really have that alpha number one receiver. So maybe Golden can step in and be that guy. And if he has that role, he might be the best receiver to own in fantasy. But I could see a lot of these guys being used and it kind of being frustrating to play any of them. This does help Jordan Love, obviously. He has those guys, and he still has Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave at tight end. And one important thing to note too is Josh Jacobs had a really dominant year last season, and Jordan Love was a little disappointing. The passing game as a whole was disappointing, but Jacobs had 15 rushing touchdowns last season, and that is a number that I could definitely see kind of regress a little bit, and we see more of those touchdowns come in the passing game, just because that's just how things go. You know, that's just often how it works. Like I'm just looking at their schedule here. Looks like he had 1, 2, 3, 4. So he didn't have a touchdown run until week 5, Josh Jacobs. Then he didn't have another one until week 8. So from week 8 on, here are Josh Jacobs' touchdowns by game: 2, 0, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1. He had a touchdown in every game except for one from week 8 on. That is, maybe that'll happen again, but I think we see them throw maybe a few more touchdowns. I really do. I'm going to come out and say it. Jordan Love, he had 25 passing touchdowns, 11 picks. It just wasn't a great statistical year for him. But yeah, enough on those stinky Packers. Let's move on to Donovan Jaxson, going to the Minnesota Vikings at pick 24. Offensive guard out of Ohio State, 6'4", 315 pounds. He played guard, but he also played tackle. And just when I opened up my Twitter after the draft, I saw a lot of people praising this pick because of his versatility. And the Vikings had a need at guard. They really added to this offensive line. I think the line was looking really good, but they had a need at guard. And this was a really, really, really good pick where he's going to go in, play guard. It's a good position for him to play. And I think this is a good pick for the Vikings. You know, you got essentially a rookie quarterback. Last year was his rookie year, but he missed the whole regular season. But JJ McCarthy is going to be the starter. Yeah, from what I read about him, you know, people really love his versatility. And we did sign Will Fries as another guard on the right side, but Jackson's going to play on the left guard spot, it looks like. So, yeah, I'm very excited to see this offensive line. And the Vikings have a chance to be a really good team. If it's going to come down to if McCarthy can play well. And honestly, this team is doing a lot to, I don't want to say protect him, but they're building around him, where JJ McCarthy, I mean, people were saying this about, oh, Caleb Williams is stepping into the best rookie situation ever. But if you're going to call McCarthy a rookie this year, this is right up there. You know, that, I mean, for my offensive lineman people, you got Darrisaw, Donovan Jaxson, who just got drafted, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries in free agency there, and then Brian O'Neill at right tackle. I mean, that's a pretty darn good offensive line. And then Justin Jefferson and Addison at wide receiver, Hawkinson at tight end, Aaron Jones, and trading for Jordan Mason at running back. Wide receiver 3 spot is a little murky. You know, I got Jalen Naylor. We brought in Rondale Moore. After that, it's like people I've never heard of, but yeah, it's looking like it's gonna be a good spot for fantasy goodness. So next up, the New York Giants trade up. And what do you think they do, chat? I'm trying to find the draft compensation here. New York Giants trade. Just because I wanna give some context as to what they gave up. I thought it would just be in this little article here, but apparently not. Why? Well, while I'm looking for that, I'm gonna just kind of walk you through what happened. So, Houston Texans were on the clock. New York Giants trade up. I'm trying to find the package here, but I thought for sure this is where we see Shedeur Sanders go. But no, they really surprised me here, and they draft Jaxson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss. The Giants traded the number 34 pick, the number 99 pick, and a third-round pick in 2026 to the Houston Texans to move up 9 spots for Dart. Yeah. So I would feel better about it if they got Sanders. Again, I'm not a huge college football prospect guy, but from all I've heard, like, Jaxson Dart has a lot of red flags and needs some development. Whereas Shedeur Sanders, you know, he's in the pocket. He's like a point guard. He gets the ball out accurately. You know, I don't know. I feel like most people would say Shedeur Sanders is the better prospect, but I feel like it's become trendy to not, you know, to not think he's good, I guess. So I don't know. But again, maybe Jaxson Dart will be good. But to me, just from what I've been hearing about him, it seems like a lot of the things that Shedeur Sanders does well are things that good quarterbacks do. Like, he's accurate, gets the ball out, good in the pocket, and Jaxson Dart has to kind of work on a lot of things to become, you know, that pro level passer. But he's got, you know, the physical ability to be relevant for fantasy. And obviously, you know, I spoke on how he might need some development. You know, the New York Giants already have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston on the depth chart. So, and Tommy DeVito. That is an insane quarterback room. Imagine you're a rookie, you try to develop, and you got Russell Wilson in one ear, Jameis Winston in the other, and then Tommy DeVito. That's so funny, bro. Yeah, but he can run a little bit, so that if he turns out to, you know, put it all together and becomes a starter and gets an opportunity, like, his running is going to be very meaningful for fantasy. But I can definitely see, like, this being kind of a developmental pick here where he sits behind Russ, or maybe even later in the season if the Giants are out of it, they put him in, you know, second half or 3/4 of the way into the year. And yeah. And I don't know. I would have taken Sanders. I think Sanders is a good pick, but even like I've been reading about it, and, you know, like, this guy says, like, oh, this is a good fit for what Brian Daboll wants to do. So according to someone on ESPN, Miller, just says Miller. So I don't know. And, you know, you got Malik Neighbors to throw to, but after that, it's Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton. I thought maybe, you know, the Giants would take a running back at some point, and they definitely still can. Tyrone Tracy Jr., Devin Singletary at running back there. But next up, let me find this trade here before I even get into it. The Falcons traded up here, and they took, at pick 26, they traded up to take James Pearce Jr., edge rusher out of Tennessee. He's 6'5", 245 pounds. So to move up to the 26th pick, they traded with the Rams. They gave the Rams a second round pick, number 46, seventh round pick, 242, as well as their first round pick in 2026. Wow. And in addition to getting the 26th pick, Atlanta also got a third rounder this year back. So they, wow, okay. Huh. Interesting. Okay. I'm just trying to quantify all this. Okay. Huh. So they gave up quite a bit to move up here. Yeah, they definitely want to fix that pass rush. They want to improve the defense. Yeah, wow. That's a lot to give up. So they have another pass rusher there. After that, another defensive player goes to the Ravens. At pick 27, we got Malaki Starks out of Georgia. So, you know, the Ravens drafted him, so you know he's going to be good. After that, another defensive player, Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle of Ohio State, goes to the Detroit Lions at pick 28. From what I've been reading, he's a little bit of a reach there, according to kind of the consensus opinions, but, you know, take your guy. After that, the Washington Commanders were on the clock with pick 29, and they take Josh Connerly Jr., a tackle. They already traded for Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. And he only played left tackle at Oregon. So are they going to move him to guard, or are they going to move him to right tackle? I guess we'll have to see. But he's going to have to probably, you know, you're not moving Laramie Tunsil. He's one of the best tackles in the league. And then after that, the Bills at pick 30 take Maxwell Hairston, cornerback out of Kentucky. This guy is awesome, dude. He was so hyped to get drafted. He seems like a funny guy. So at the very least, he's got that going for him. Yeah, and they got a good cornerback. He had the fastest 40 time at the combine with 4.28. He projects as a slot corner. But the team already has Taron Johnson there to start, so we'll see like what he ends up playing. But yeah, interesting. He's fast. So after that, linebacker Jahdae Campbell out of Alabama goes to the Eagles at pick 31. Yeah, he fell. He I believe he was supposed to go earlier, and he fell. And actually, the Eagles traded up one pick. It's interesting. They played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, Chiefs versus Eagles, and then they end up doing a trade in the draft. So the Eagles obviously had pick 32, Chiefs had pick 31, but then they swapped those picks. The Eagles sent over a 5th round pick, I believe it was, to move up one spot just to make sure they got their guy. But yeah, from everything I've heard about him, he's supposed to be like a really, really good player. And like, I believe didn't he have some sort of injury? Like, because he was supposed to be like I can't remember why he fell. Was it injury or was it something else? I can't remember what it was. I thought they said he had some sort of injury. Yeah. Okay. He had an injury, but he would have been like a top 15 prospect, and then he falls to the Eagles. So of course he's going to be good, and the Eagles just get better. As he said during his post-draft interview, the richer get rich. That's what he said. He didn't say the rich get richer. He said the richer get rich. So we're going to go with that. And then the last pick of the draft, Josh Simmons goes to the Chiefs out of Ohio State, offensive tackle. This was the guy they wanted. according to some report, they thought he'd be gone. He wasn't. He was on the clock, so they took a tackle. And, you know, the Chiefs have really dominated the league, but we've only seen him, and he actually had an injury too, so he fell a little bit. The Chiefs have been dominant. They lost the Super Bowl to the Eagles and the Bucks because they could not protect Mahomes. If I remember correctly, they were dealing with some offensive lineman injuries against the Bucks, and then last year the Eagles pass rush was just insanely good. So you want to make sure Mahomes has at least some form of offensive line play so that he can stay upright and do what he does. So that's going to recap our first round little overview here. Sorry, I'm not like the most in the weeds on the college prospects. But you know, I do think I kind of have a good idea of how some of these guys might fit in to their to where they went. And you know, I guess the one thing that we need to touch on here is Shedeur Sanders not getting drafted. I thought he'd go to Pittsburgh. I thought he'd go to the Giants, and then no one traded up. So, yeah, we'll see where he goes in round 2. Assuming he goes in round 2, maybe that's silly to assume at this point. You know, I think he'll go. I mean, the Browns are on the clock. Pick 1 of round 2. So hey, you know, they need a quarterback. You know, Kirk Cousins has been linked to being traded there, but yeah, I think at this point in the draft, I'm not trying to glaze Sanders, by the way. I just think it's kind of ridiculous he fell this far when it's like, hey man, so many teams need quarterbacks and like everyone's just passing on them. The Browns have 2 picks. It looks like 2 of the first 4 picks, number 1 and number 4 in the second round. It was Browns, Texans, Titans, Raiders. I mean, the Raiders could take, I mean, they got Geno there, but I don't know the contract details on him if they have an out, but obviously not the Bears. The Saints at pick 8 of the second round. If he's still there, I think that would be a really good spot for him to go with Derek Carr's, you know, injury, not knowing what's going on with that, and potentially, you know, him maybe not being the franchise guy long term. Got the Jets. They you know, at that point they could take him behind Fields and maybe take over. Fields is far from a lock. Even the Colts at pick 13, like, yeah, I mean, I know they got Richardson and Danny Dimes, but you know, I think Sanders could be an upgrade there long term. The Rams behind Stafford. Even like the Dolphins drafting him as a backup behind Tua, who always gets injured, it seems like. Yeah, there's a few spots there. And then after that, for a while, it's pretty dry. So, yeah, we'll see. The best remaining players right now, in terms of like fantasy goodness, Shedeur Sanders is, you know, the best quarterback. Tyler Show, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, Kyle McCord, Riley Leonard. Stop the list there. And then we got some running backs here. Travion Henderson is still there. Quinchon Judkins, Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, Cam Scattaboo, Dylan Sampson, Devin Neal, TJ Giddens, Jordan James, RJ Harvey. I mean, the list is drying up a little bit there, but there's still some really good running back prospects available. And then a wide receiver, I'll just read a few here. We got Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris, Luther Burden III, Jalen Knoll, Jack Beck, Jalen Royals, Kyle Williams, Jalen Lane, Ty Felton, and Torrey Horton. And tight end, we got Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor, Terrace Ferguson, Gunnar Helm, Harold Fannin Jr., Mitchell Evans, and Jackson Hawes. So I'm excited to see where these running backs go. I think that's going to kind of shake things up. But that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like, follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast, and stay tuned for more updates on the next 6 rounds of the draft. I'm excited to see what happens, and my Vikings only have, I think, 3 picks left after tonight, so maybe they'll trade back and get some more draft capital. I don't know what they're gonna do. They're gonna dominate. Everyone they pick is gonna be great. I'll tell you that. All right, Skull Vikes. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.